Nelson, we're following some breaking news at this hour involving the federal corruption trial of Corrine Brown. The judge has closed the court to interview a juror. First Coast News reporter Clark Foraker is live right now at the courthouse. He has the very latest details. Clark, what have you learned?
Keitha, what we know right now is the media basically lining the halls. They've been asked to leave the courtroom because the judge is interviewing one of the jurors after both parties, both attorneys from both sides, asked him to. This is all stemming from what we know as a call that was placed to the court overnight by one of the jurors. And that juror issued some concerns, raised some concerns about another juror who talked about a higher being of some kind. We don't know the specifics of what was said. They have kept that confidential. And in that vein is the reason why they've kicked all the media out of the courtroom. They want to be able to have a private, concealed conversation with the juror who made the call. We don't know if the judge will talk to the juror who actually said the things in the deliberations that have raised the concerns. So right now, the judge is questioning a juror who called the court overnight, raising some concerns about things that were said in the deliberation of this trial. Of course, those deliberations have gone on for more than 2 days now, and so these jurors have had a lot of time together and certainly have plenty of things to talk about, both with 2 weeks of testimony and evidence, and then also 22 different charges involving Congresswoman Brown. And so certainly things come up when you have a trial of this magnitude, this important, and oftentimes you'll hear of the jury having questions. And so it's not uncommon for there to be a question and the jury to be brought in and in front of the media for their question to be read and for the lawyers and the judge to talk about it. This, however, is a diversion from what we normally see in these big federal trials because this conversation between the judge and the juror is happening in secret. And we don't exactly know why that is. I mean, some of what was said and why the judge has chosen to handle it this way is an unknown at this point. And of course, the biggest question is what was said during those deliberations that's caused all this concern, and is what was said something that could impact the outcome of this trial? Those are the two biggest questions at this point, and we just don't have any indication about answering either of those two questions because the judge is doing this whole conversation under seal. Also, the way this played out this morning has been an alteration from how court has gone now for the past 2.5 weeks. The judge has started at almost 9 a.m. kind of religiously every morning, even on the days when there were big witnesses testifying in this trial. But this morning, Corrine Brown was here at about 8:15. Attorneys from both sides were in the courtroom and the judge as well. That's kind of an emergency hearing. And so traditionally, if there were questions or things going on with the jury, the media and the parties would have a 15-minute heads up to get to the courtroom and get assembled for a hearing to take place. But this taking more of an emergency nature because it happened so quickly this morning, and obviously now that the media have been kicked out of the courtroom for this part of the trial is just sort of leading us to believe this is something significant and something the judge wants to be able to vet out in a very careful and well thought way because of what it could mean. But a lot of what's been said, how it was said, and how it could impact anything, I mean, it's all speculation at this point because no one's in there right now except for the judge, the juror who placed the call last night, parties from both sides, and we understand Congresswoman Brown is in the courtroom as well. So right now what we can tell you from court is that everyone's here. We, the media, are waiting outside in the halls to be allowed back in the courtroom, and we expect, or at least hope, that some sort of explanation will be provided at that point where we can get a better understanding of what's actually transpired. But right now we're doing our best to keep you updated on Twitter with the very latest of what we know, and certainly all of the sources who have the deepest knowledge of what's going on are locked in the courtroom. And so there's not a tremendous number of places to get information right now as this emergency hearing and this questioning by the judge plays itself out, and and we'll see how it all impacts everything on the backside. Of course, there's, we've talked every day to you folks, 12 jurors, they all have to decide guilty or innocent, not on one thing, not on one charge for Corrine Brown, but 22 different times, 22 different charges. They'll have to make a decision each time. And as you can imagine, getting 12 people together to do that, it is no light task. And many folks here have anticipated and continue to that getting the jury to a verdict will take a number of days. Kiva?
Clarky, I know there are a lot of unanswered questions at this point, but let's go through a little bit of a timeline, if you can. We know that the call was made by the juror last night, Tuesday night, and then normally the jurors were told, we normally arrive at the courtroom at about 9 or so, but things happened a bit early today. I saw one of your tweets explaining that they came in around 8:15 or so. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, so the traditional, what we've experienced over the past 2.5 weeks, and of course the judge has been very accommodating to press coverage in this case because of the high profile nature. Typically, the jury gets here, is asked to be here about 8:45, and court is scheduled to start at 9. And so the judge brings the jury in, kind of says, glad you're all here, makes sure all the 12 jurors are here and ready to go for the day. And then very quickly, they begin on the first day and then continue in the following days their deliberations. And the judge has a standing policy that if there's any reason that there's an issue in the court, a question from the jurors or a reason that the attorneys and Corrine Brown should return to the courtroom, that they get a 15-minute notice. So the judge's staff calls both lawyers and they have 15 minutes to get from wherever they are in downtown Jacksonville back here to the federal courthouse. This morning, though, a diversion, and that Corrine Brown showed up at 8:15 and her lawyers, which leads us to believe that they had an indication something might be happening this morning, or there may be a question from the jury. And so they were here at 8:15 this morning and began their conversations with the judge. It's worth to make all that make sense that the jury does not have to be present for the attorneys and the judge to have a formal conversation about the trial. So we don't think the jury showed up earlier, or at least what we know of the jury is that they didn't show up any earlier, but certainly Corrine Brown and her legal team and then the assistant U.S. attorneys prosecuting this case, they were all in the courtroom about 45 minutes earlier than usual. And you know, you might think, well, why don't you just ask the jurors if they showed up early? There's a media ban. The media cannot talk to the jury per the judge's orders until after this trial is complete. So we're barred from talking to them about their schedules or what they may or may not know at this point about what's going on. And so that's kind of how the schedule changed this morning and looked significantly different than all the other days we've had in the trial so far.